part of why neurodiversity and neurodivergence as a term and a concept was created in the first place, is to help remove some of that shame and stigma that oftentimes gets wrapped around disability, kind of doing away with this idea of typical and atypical or normal or abnormal, and instead just recognizing that every human is different, every brain is different. That's a good thing, that's a beautiful thing. Welcome to Chez, Genèse, the place of new beginnings. My name is Catherine Hubert, and I founded and own a French-inspired cafe where, as a team, we are on a mission to change the way our world views and employs adults with disabilities. Our restaurant was born and is based in Greensboro, North Carolina, and that's where we practice and teach our mission and model. This is our channel where we dive in deep to who we are, what we do, and why we do it. Our hope is that this content is empowering to disabled and non-disabled humans alike, and that no matter what perspective you are coming from, whether that's employer, employee, parent, friend, or Chez Genèse fan, you feel welcomed, you learn something new, and you walk away with a deeper appreciation and understanding of humanity. Hey everybody, welcome back. We are excited to be stepping into our New Year's goals, our dreams, our hopes. Part of that is continuing to push into the work of disability advocacy and education, specifically around disability language and employment. Today we are going to be switching kind of from using the word disability so much to speaking a little bit about the word neurodivergent. It's a word that maybe you've heard, especially in more recent years and with more increased social media awareness around neurodivergence and disability, but I think there's oftentimes still some confusion or a lack of understanding about what the term actually means and how it's being used. So we're going to talk about that, and hopefully that will be helpful. Today's video is going to be a little bit on the shorter side. We're just going to cover a few summarizing thoughts and points, breaking down just kind of the basics of the term, where it came from, how it's used, a pro, a con, and then we'll get more into it in the coming weeks. So the term neurodivergent, or the concept of neurodiversity, is something that originated in the 1990s. So it hasn't actually historically been around for all of that long. So if you've been thinking, where did this term come from? I am not that familiar with it. There's a reason behind that. With any term or concept, it sometimes takes a bit of time for it to get totally off the ground. So even though it's gained a lot of momentum, I think, in the past several years, it's something that's still fairly new to our language as a society. It was created by a sociologist named Judy Singer, who is an autistic human and wanted to push out into the world a deeper understanding, acceptance, and willingness to learn about all kinds of brains, making the observation that no brain is the same, right? Which feels like that should be common sense or common knowledge, but is not always the way things are treated medically or in our education system. So there was this push for a deeper understanding and just awareness, acceptance of many types of brains. A big part of the goal was to increase an understanding, an acceptance, and a willingness to learn about all brains, especially ones that aren't our own. I think the waters can get just a little bit muddy there sometimes, because in an effort to accept and understand that brains are different, when people are identifying as neurodivergent or using neurodiversity as a concept, it still is in many ways pointing back to a baseline, and that brains that aren't included in this baseline are part of the neurodiversity or the neurodivergent umbrella or circle. So just know that. If it feels a little bit confusing or like there's some nuance to it, there's almost two concepts or ideas that are being presented or promoted at the same time. One, that every brain is different and there's no brain that is the same, but then also understanding that in our world we still have somewhat of a standard or a metric that we use to measure our development, our intelligence, and that things that oftentimes fall outside of that basic metric can be included in or considered to be part of neurodivergence. At the end of the day, neurodiversity and neurodivergence is still a social concept or construct. It is not a medical diagnosis. While many disabilities can fit underneath the umbrella of neurodiversity and neurodivergent, it does not mean that all do. And not every person with a disability that could consider themselves to be neurodivergent is going to choose to identify that way. For the most part, disabilities that fall under the intellectual and developmental disability umbrella could also follow underneath the neurodivergent umbrella. If you're looking at disabilities that are more physical in nature, then most likely those would not fall under neurodiversity, since the neuro aspect is speaking directly to the brain. So what does this mean when you hear people identifying as neurodivergent, or you hear the term being used? Well, someone who identifies as being neurodivergent may have a disability that is diagnosed, but they may not. It may be an identity that they have chosen to take on for themselves, and that is completely fine. Again, this is where disclosure becomes important. It's someone's choice whether or not they want to disclose information about anything in their life, but specifically in this instance about disability. So it's someone's choice how they want to disclose, when they want to, what that looks like for them. If someone is open to talking about their disability, or is talking about their identity as a neurodivergent human, then there's the possibility and the potential there for an open door and for you to engage in some conversation, to ask some questions. Again, we always recommend and encourage respect and kindness in that process, and take your cues and your lead from the person who's initiating that information in that conversation. Neurodivergence, just like disability, is not a term to put on someone or to claim that on their behalf. That's up to the individual to disclose, to talk about, and to express their own comfort level with. We just want to say all of that up front. As you're learning terms, as you're learning language, it's important to have your ears open, to be listening to what people around you are saying. But like anything, you don't place a term or a classification on someone without their consent, or without them being willing to disclose that first. Again, because there's nothing negative about having a disability. That's something that's a stigma that we're trying to break. That's part of why neurodiversity and neurodivergence as a term and a concept was created in the first place, is to help remove some of that shame and stigma that oftentimes gets wrapped around disability, kind of doing away with this idea of typical and atypical, or normal or abnormal, and instead just recognizing that every human is different, every brain is different. That's a good thing, that's a beautiful thing, and stepping more into celebration of that, and a willingness to understand and to learn from the humans in our lives, instead of othering or marginalizing people or pushing them out based on a certain standard or metric. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. That's brief, that's quick. If you have questions, if you have comments, thoughts, please drop them below. Thank you for being here and being part of our channel. We would love for you to hit the like button or to subscribe to our channel for more content, and we will see you next week.